Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. In today's video, we're going to break down the key tactical themes in Manchester United's 2-2 draw against Southampton. When we break down the game, when we do look at the board, we have Manchester United unchanged once again in a 4-2-3-1. And we ended up seeing Southampton drop off into a 4-4-2 and looking to stifle Manchester United's ability to build attacks from the back and get in behind their backline. So when we break down the first tactical theme, it has to be Southampton's pressing from the front, because they did a very good job of disrupting Manchester United's build-up play and ensuring that they couldn't create chances in that opening half. If we assess Southampton's base shape, if they're not pressing from the front, it should see the two strikers in between Nemanja Matic, allowing the center backs on the ball. Then you would have Redmond and Armstrong stepping out to the fullbacks, and then that would leave a midfield battle with Romeo or Ward-Prowse looking to step to Bruno Fernandes, and the other player stepping out into the path of Pogba. And then you would have the fullbacks closing out Rashford and Greenwood, and then have the center backs dealing with Martial. What was important with Southampton's shape was that they were looking to compress that space between the lines for Bruno Fernandes to get on the ball, and we often saw him dropping off a bit deeper ahead of the midfield bank to receive possession. But what we also saw in those earlier stages was that Ward-Prowse and Romeo were shifting out into the wider areas to create 2v3 situations so that United couldn't dominate in those wider areas with Rashford and Shaw and Greenwood and Wan-Bissaka. Throughout that opening 20 to 25 minutes, we saw variations of Southampton's pressing, and they did a very good job of disrupting United and forcing them into mistakes. One example ended up seeing the center forward stepping out to the center backs, and then you had Romeo stepping out into the path of Pogba, with Ward-Prowse stepping towards Matic, and then in that sequence you had Bednarek stepping into the path of Bruno Fernandes. Since the restart, we've seen Matic play a key role in helping United bypass that initial press from the opposition. He would either drop in between the center backs or shift to the left of Maguire to form a back three, which pushes the fullbacks forward and gives United a 3v2 in most situations. Hasenhuttl was prepared for Matic to shift in those zones, and there was an example shortly after that where you ended up seeing Armstrong stepping out into the path of Matic, and with Armstrong leaving Shaw, what ended up happening there was that yes, United are 3v3 and the onus would be to shift the ball out to Shaw, but what we ended up seeing from Ward-Prowse was that he shifted over to cover for Armstrong, and that disrupted that United build-up play. The alternative to Matic shifting to the left of Maguire would see him split the center backs, and in that situation you had Redmond joining that Southampton front two, and that's where you ended up seeing Ward-Prowse once again shifting over for cover towards Greenwood, and then Romeo pushing in towards Pogba, and that's where you saw somewhat of a pentagonal midfield shape. And we can also look to a time where you ended up seeing the forwards out to the center backs. Once again, it was Redmond on Matic, and then you saw Bertrand pushing towards Wan-Bissaka, Ward-Prowse offering the covering on Greenwood, and that witnessed Southampton squeezing Manchester United to the right side of the pitch and forcing Wan-Bissaka to play long. And to no surprise, even when we look to Southampton's best opportunities in that opening half, it stemmed through their pressing. When you look to the build-up to their opener, it's Adams pressing De Gea, it's Ings stepping into the path of Pogba. What you end up seeing is that United do have the opportunity to make amends for Pogba losing the ball, and it stems through Pogba, but he allows Redmond to break into the box, which pulls out Lindelof, and through Adams and Armstrong's movement, you end up seeing Southampton creating a 2v1 at that back post, leaving Maguire vulnerable and creating space for Armstrong to put Southampton ahead. And then later on in that half, it was Pogba again guilty of losing the ball in midfield. He was ahead of that Southampton 4-5-1 with Adams shifting out to the right-hand side temporarily, and that's where he is pressed by Adams and Ings, loses the ball. It ultimately leads to a Southampton 2v2 situation, but with Ings darting between Lindelof and Shaw, you end up seeing Adams overhit his pass, and that saved United. So besides Southampton's pressing in those opening stages, the only real threat that the away side posed was down their right-hand side. Over on the left, Greenwood and Wan-Bissaka did a good job against Redmond and Bertrand, despite their attempt to create overloads down that left-hand side. But over on the right, what you ended up seeing was that Rashford wasn't tracking the movement of Walker-Peters, so he was able to push forward and adopt high positions, and that is what Southampton wanted. They wanted Bertrand and Walker-Peters to adopt high positions to peg back Rashford and Greenwood, both Rashford not tracking back, largely based off the assumption that we believe that that intent was to break in transition if United won the ball. What ended up happening there was that it forced Shaw to track that movement unless Matic shifted over. But if Matic didn't shift over and Shaw was forced to deal with Walker-Peters' presence, that created avenues for Armstrong to drop off Shaw to either drift laterally across the center backs or to drift into that midfield zone, looking to receive the ball between the lines based off the fact that Shaw was occupied by Walker-Peters. So as you can see, United did encounter issues in those opening stages against Southampton's overall shape and pressing, but they were able to get back into the game due to Southampton defensive mistakes and their ability to isolate Walker-Peters down that left-hand side. When we look to how they were able to get their equalizer, what you end up seeing is that Greenwood and Wan-Bissaka are closed out down that right-hand side. You have Redmond and Bertrand ahead of Wan-Bissaka. You end up seeing Romeo shift across Bednarek to close down Greenwood, and then you even have Ward-Prowse shifting across to close down Bruno Fernandes. Pogba is the free man on that side, and if the ball was played to him, you would see a Southampton player step, with that most likely being Redmond. And although Southampton's press was good on that right-hand side, there was the risk that if United were able to shift it out to the left-hand side, you have Rashford against Walker-Peters in the box, and then Martial isolating Stevens. United was able to do that, and it was Pogba who played that pass freely into that zone. And even though United got that ball in that zone, Martial does well to hold off Stevens, but Southampton are able to clear danger. You have Armstrong, Walker-Peters, and Bednarek able to step to Martial to ensure that he can't lay that ball off to Rashford. And while all three Southampton players hesitate to make a move, the biggest mistake here was that Walker-Peters steps away from Rashford, creating a passing lane in towards him. And if you step away from Rashford in towards Martial, then you have to make the challenge, and he doesn't do that, and that allows Martial to slide the ball out to Rashford, and that's how United were able to level the game. And then when we assess how Southampton were able to take the lead, it stemmed through a pressing breakdown. You have the front two and Redmond stepping towards the United center backs and Matic, and then Bertrand stepping to Wan-Bissaka with Romeo shifting out to Greenwood. The problem here is that Ward-Prowse should be stepping out into the path of Paul Pogba, but he retreats, and that allows Pogba to receive the ball free in midfield. And by the time Ward-Prowse attempts to recover his positioning, Pogba was able to split Armstrong and Ward-Prowse to find Bruno Fernandes in between the lines, and then he's able to slide the ball out to Martial, who's able to run at Walker-Peters and put United into the lead. They still should have put the game away midway through that second half when they once again exploited that left-hand side. It was Rashford cutting across Walker-Peters, Martial making a darting run in between the center backs to receive a Rashford pass, and when Martial received that ball in left half space, he was able to pull it back across Bednarek for Bruno Fernandes and Rashford breaking in towards that 6-yard box. But luckily for Southampton, Bertrand made a last-ditch tackle that denied Rashford a for-sure goal. So as you can see, the key theme for Southampton was if it wasn't Armstrong finding that space, it was the narrow positioning of the wider players that created space for the fullbacks to push forward beyond Greenwood and Rashford. There was one example in particular where we ended up seeing Armstrong receive the ball ahead of Shaw, Rashford not tracking the run of Walker-Peters, the ball shifted out to that right-hand side, and Walker-Peters delivered a quality ball through that 6-yard box, but neither Adams, Ings, or Redmond at the far post attack it, and that got United off the hook. Ultimately, following David De Gea making a quality save on Redmond, Southampton were able to rescue a point here through the substitute Obafemi. But when you break down that goal, once again, it's poor set-piece defending from Manchester United this time. You had Bednarek winning the front post header ahead of Matic and Rashford, but when you look to the back post, you have Maguire shifting over to help out Wan-Bissaka with Stevens, but then you see Obafemi goal side of Lindelof in that 6-yard box. But then you also witness movement from Smallbone and Bertrand off Fred, and ultimately it would be 3v1 in that zone if Obafemi didn't get onto the ball. But what you can see here is that this wasn't a vintage United performance. They struggled against Southampton's pressing in the opening stages, and although they were able to find a legitimate route to goal through isolating Walker-Peters with the running of Rashford and Martial, what you can say is that their goals stem from defensive mistakes and Southampton pressing breakdowns. In the second half, they struggled to create chances, and Southampton stuck to their overall attacking approach, getting into good positions, and when they gambled by bringing on more attacking players, it ultimately paid off, and it puts another dent in Manchester United's quest for a top 4 spot. Hi everybody, thanks for watching, and subscribe here for your latest tactical analysis and daily commentary on the Interview show. And if that wasn't enough, don't forget you could find more organic, unfiltered soccer/football analysis on the Interviews podcast, the best soccer/football podcast in the world, available on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and any Android apps on your Android devices.